My name is Mark, 57M, and my wife, Lisa, 55F, just shattered my entire world. We've been married for 30 years, 3 decades of what I thought was a strong, stable marriage. We have 2 grown kids, a paid-off house, and a life that, on the surface, seemed picture-perfect. But the thing about life is, sometimes the picture is just a carefully painted illusion. Lisa and I met in college. She was the outgoing, social one, always the life of the party. I was the quiet, steady type. Opposites attract, right? We built a life together, supported each other through tough times, and raised our kids with the belief that family was everything. And maybe that was my first mistake, believing in family above all. Because as it turns out, family is exactly what destroyed me.
Lisa chatted on me.
And not just with some stranger. No, that would have been too easy. She betrayed me with my own brother, David, 52M. I still can't wrap my head around it. Looking back, there were signs. Lisa started staying out later than usual, always blaming it on book club meetings, dinner with the girls, or errands that somehow took 3 hours. She guarded her phone like it was a national security device, always flipping it face down or taking calls in another room. And then there were the little things, like how she started dressing up more, wearing perfume even when she was just running to Target. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was so wrong. At first, I chalked it up to midlife changes. People evolve, right? Maybe Lisa was just trying to rediscover herself. I figured I should support her instead of being suspicious. But then there was David. My younger brother and I were never the closest, but we weren't estranged either. He was always the charming one, the risk-taker, the guy who knew how to turn any situation into a party. Women loved him. Hell, people in general loved him. But he was also unreliable, impulsive, and had a long history of treating relationships like disposable napkins. He'd been divorced twice and was always dating someone new. I never thought for a second that someone new could be my wife. Lisa started mentioning David more often in casual conversation. Oh, I ran into David today at the coffee shop. David told me about this new restaurant. Maybe we should try it? David and I were just talking about that the other day. It seemed innocent. He was my brother, after all. Why would I suspect anything? Then, the late nights started making less sense. Lisa would come home smelling like wine, her lipstick slightly smudged, claiming she had lost track of time with her friends. But every time I asked which friends, the names changed. And then came the weirdest thing. David started being nicer to me. He'd always been competitive, the kind of brother who enjoyed rubbing his success, or just dumb luck, in my face. But suddenly he was texting me more, asking how I was doing, inviting me out for drinks. At first, I thought maybe he was turning over a new leaf. Maybe he was trying to build a better relationship with me. Now, I realized what was actually happening. He was covering his tracks. Lisa was getting sloppy, and David was running interference. And I, the idiot, had no idea. Everything unraveled on a random Wednesday. Lisa had told me she was going out for dinner with her friends, as usual. I didn't even bother questioning it anymore. But something felt off. Maybe it was the way she barely looked at me when she said it. Maybe it was how quickly she grabbed her purse and left, like she couldn't wait to be out of the house. I tried to brush it off, but my gut wouldn't let me. An hour later, I got a text from my daughter, Emily, 28F. Hey Dad, are you and Mom having dinner at Mateo's tonight? I just saw her car in the parking lot. Mateo's, the restaurant David had recommended a few weeks ago. My stomach dropped. I told Emily no, Lisa wasn't with me. She texted back almost immediately. Weird. I could have sworn I saw her. Maybe she's with Aunt Kelly? Kelly was one of Lisa's friends. One of the many she always claimed to be out with. Could have let it go. Could have ignored it. But something in me snapped. I got in my car and drove to Mateo's. I don't even remember the drive. Just the sound of my own breathing. My pulse hammering in my ears. When I pulled into the parking lot, there it was, Lisa's car. Parked right next to David's. My own brother's car. I felt sick. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but at that moment, my brain was racing through every lie, every excuse, Every time she had gaslit me into thinking I was imagining things. I stepped inside the restaurant, scanning the room, my heart pounding. And then I saw them, Lisa and David, in a corner booth, leaning in close, whispering. Lisa's hand resting on his arm. Her wedding ring, our wedding ring, glinting under the dim lights as she played with the sleeve of his jacket. They were laughing, smiling, like a couple, like we used to. I stood there frozen, my entire body numb. It was like watching a movie where you already know the ending, but you're still hoping for a plot twist that never comes. And then Lisa looked up. Our eyes met. Her smile disappeared. And for the first time in 30 years, I saw it real, undeniable guilt. For a moment, time froze. Lisa's face went pale. David, on the other hand, had the audacity to look annoyed, like I was the one intruding. I walked over to their table, my hands clenched into fists. I wasn't even sure what I was going to say, but I knew one thing. I needed to hear whatever pathetic excuse Lisa was about to come up with. Mark. Lisa's voice was unnaturally high-pitched, forced. What are you doing here? I stared at her, then at David. That's my question. She let out a nervous laugh, tucking her hair behind her ear like she always did when she was lying. I told you, dinner with the girls, but Kelly canceled last minute, and David happened to be nearby, so we decided to grab a bite. David leaned back in his seat, arms crossed.
Yeah, man.
Nothing to freak out about. I ignored him. Lisa, you're telling me this is just dinner? Yes. You're overreacting, she snapped, suddenly shifting into defensive mode. Why are you even here? Are you following me? There it was. The deflection. The attempt to turn this around on me. I took a deep breath. Emily saw your car here. She thought you were with me. Lisa blinked rapidly, like she was searching for a way out. Oh, well, I didn't think I needed to report my every move to you. I turned to David. And you? What's your excuse? He scoffed. I don't need an excuse to have dinner, do I? It was infuriating, the way they were both trying to act like I was being unreasonable. But then I noticed something. A small, red smudge on Lisa's wrist. Lipstick. Lipstick that wasn't on her lips. I looked at David's collar. A faint pinkish stain near the neckline. And that's when I knew. Lisa must have realized what I was staring at because she quickly pulled her hand under the table. Mark, let's not make a scene. I laughed. A bitter, humorless laugh. Oh, I'm making a scene? You're sleeping with my brother? And I'm the problem. David groaned.
Jesus, man.
Keep your voice down. I turned to him, my vision going red. You're my brother. And you're sneaking around with my wife? How long has this been going on? Lisa stood up suddenly, grabbing my arm. Mark, please, let's talk about this at home. Why? So you can come up with a better lie. I yanked my arm away. Other diners were starting to glance our way. Lisa's eyes darted around the restaurant, clearly embarrassed. Good. She should be. David sighed, rubbing his temple. Look, Mark, this isn't how we wanted you to find out. I repeated, my stomach twisting. Lisa inhaled sharply. Let's just go home. Okay? We can. I shook my head, stepping back. I'm done. And with that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them sitting there in the wreckage of their lies. But I wasn't just done with dinner. I was done with her. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind raced, replaying every moment, every excuse, every lie Lisa had ever told me. Had it been months? Years? Had every holiday, every family dinner been a joke to them? By the time I pulled into the driveway, I felt hollow. Lisa wasn't far behind. I heard her car screech to a stop outside before she rushed in, slamming the door behind her. Mark, please, she started breathless. Let's talk. I didn't say anything. I just walked to the living room and sat down, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. She sat across from me, shifting nervously. Okay, I know how bad this looks, but you need to hear me out. I finally looked at her. How long? Lisa swallowed hard. It was just a mistake. I scoffed. A mistake? Which time was the mistake? The first time or the 100th? Her face twisted in frustration. It wasn't like that. I never meant for this to happen. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, you just tripped and fell into bed with my brother? She crossed her arms. You don't understand, Mark. You've been so distant lately. Always busy, always distracted. I felt alone. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Are you serious right now? I snapped. You're blaming me for this? Her eyes filled with tears. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying, I was vulnerable. And David was there. David was there? I repeated, shaking my head. Yeah, I bet he was. Lisa sniffled. It didn't mean anything. I love you. I love you, Mark. I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time in 30 years, I felt nothing. No love.
No sympathy.
Just betrayal. Love doesn't look like this, I said quietly. Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't tell if they were for me or for the life she knew was crumbling around her. I stood up, walking past her. Where are you going? She choked out. I didn't even turn around. To call a lawyer. And just like that, our 30-year marriage was over. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Lisa and David, laughing in that dimly lit restaurant. Her hand on his, the look of sheer guilt when she spotted me. By morning, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay in the house with her.
Back to back.
Just enough clothes for a few days, my laptop, my toothbrush. Lisa sat on the edge of our bed, watching me with red-rimmed eyes. You don't have to do this, she whispered. I stopped. Lisa, I don't even know who you are anymore. Her lip trembled. Mark, please. It was just a stupid mistake. A distraction. It's you I want. It's us. I zipped up my bag. Us. I let out a bitter laugh. There is no us anymore, Lisa. She stood up suddenly, grabbing my arm. I'll do anything to fix this. Therapy, marriage counseling. Just don't throw away 30 years over a mistake. I yanked my arm away. You already threw it away, Lisa. She crumbled onto the bed, sobbing. For a split second, a part of me wanted to comfort her. But then I remembered whose fault this was. I walked out the door. I stayed at a hotel for a few nights while I got my thoughts together. I didn't tell my kids right away. I didn't even know how to tell them. How do you explain that their mother, the woman who packed their school lunches and tucked them in at night, had been sneaking around with their uncle? Emily called on the second day. Hey, Dad, she said cautiously. Mom told me you're out of town? I sighed, rubbing my temples. Not exactly. Listen, sweetheart, I need to tell you something. There was silence on the other end. Then, a slow, shaky breath. It's about Mom and Uncle David, isn't it? My heart sank. You knew. No, she said quickly. But I suspected. She was always talking about him. And when I saw her car at Mateo's, something just felt off. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It's true, Em. Your mom. She cheated on me. With David. A long pause. Then a choked-out whisper. That bitch. I almost laughed. Emily. No, Dad. I mean it. She snapped. She destroyed our family for what? Uncle David? What the hell is wrong with her? I let out a slow breath. I don't know, sweetheart. She was quiet for a moment. Are you divorcing her? Yeah, I said. I can't stay married to someone who did this to me. Good, she said firmly. She doesn't deserve you. And for the first time in days, I felt something other than rage or sadness. I felt like I wasn't alone in this. After my conversation with Emily, I braced myself for the fallout. I knew word would spread fast through the family. I knew there'd be drama, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. 2 days later, I got a call from my son, Jake, 31M. Dad, he said, his voice tense. We need to talk. Now. I sighed. I know, son. It's about your mom.
No, Dad.
It's about David. That got my attention. What about him? Jake hesitated. Then, in a voice filled with disgust, he said, He's been doing this for years. I frowned. What? I just talked to Aunt Kelly, he said. She told me something insane. David didn't just cheat with Mom. He did the exact same thing to his last wife. I gritted my teeth. That doesn't surprise me. No, Dad, listen, he didn't just cheat on her. He cheated on her with her sister. I went completely still. What the hell did you just say? You heard me, Jake said. Aunt Kelly told me that when David was married to his second wife, he had an affair with her sister for over a year. When the wife found out, she divorced him immediately. I felt like I was going to be sick. My brother, the man I grew up with, the man who was supposed to have my back, was a serial family wrecker. Jake continued, his voice tight with anger. And get this, Mom knew. She knew the whole time. Aunt Kelly said they all talked about it at a family party years ago. I clenched my jaw. So she knew what kind of man David was. And she still... Yep, Jake said bitterly. She still let it happen. I rubbed a hand down my face. My wife hadn't just betrayed me. She'd done it with a man who had a pattern of ruining families. She wasn't just reckless. She was deliberate. And she had no excuse. Later that night, Lisa called. I debated ignoring it, but I was too angry. I needed to hear what kind of pathetic defense she'd try to give this time. Mark, she said, her voice small. Can we talk? I kept my voice cold. Talk. A deep sigh. I don't want to lose you. I almost laughed. Lisa, you already lost me the second you decided he was worth more than our marriage. Silence. Then, in a shaky voice, she said, I made a mistake. No, I said firmly. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something hurtful in an argument. You chose this, Lisa. You knew what kind of man David was. And you still threw away our family for him. She started crying. I don't love him, Mark. I love you. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. You don't get to love me now, Lisa. I hung up, and for the first time in weeks I felt lighter, because I knew, without a doubt, there was no going back. After I hung up on Lisa, I knew the next step, telling the rest of the family. I wasn't going to let Lisa or David spin some sob story about how I was the bad guy. So I started making calls. By the end of the day, everyone knew. My parents were horrified. My mom kept saying, not David, not my son. My dad was furious in that quiet, restrained way of his, the kind that meant he was about to disown someone. Aunt Kelly was livid. I always knew Lisa was selfish, but this? With her own brother-in-law. The real explosion, though, came from David's own ex-wife, Megan. Apparently, once word got out, someone told her what happened. And Megan, being the no-nonsense woman she is, decided to call Lisa directly. I wasn't there for the conversation, but Emily gave me the highlights later. Megan destroyed Lisa over the phone. So you thought you were special? You thought David loved you? Honey, he's been screwing over women for years. You're just another idiot who fell for it. Lisa, of course, tried to play the victim. It was a mistake. I never meant. Save it. Megan shot back. You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew he cheated on me. You knew he cheated on his first wife. And you still thought you were different? That's pathetic. Lisa hung up in tears. Good. Meanwhile, David had gone radio silent, probably hiding like the coward he is. But I wasn't done with him yet. 2 days later, I went to our parents' house. David was there. He looked like hell, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, like the weight of his choices was finally sinking in. But I didn't feel sorry for him, not even a little. He barely met my eyes. Mark, I cut him off. Why? He swallowed hard.
No excusas, David. He snapped.
No, I was drunk. No, it just happened. Just tell me why. He sighed, rubbing his face. I don't know, man. I was lonely. She was there. Lonely? I laughed bitterly. So your solution was to destroy your own brother's marriage? He winced. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. You knew exactly what this would do to me, and you still did it. David had nothing to say to that. I took a deep breath. You're dead to me, David. His eyes widened. Mark, come on.
No.
You don't get to come back from this. I turned to our parents. And if you expect me to ever be in the same room as him again, you can forget it. David looked genuinely panicked. We're brothers. Not anymore, I said. Enjoy, Lisa. You deserve each other. And with that, I walked out. I had finally closed the door on him. And it felt good. After cutting David out of my life, I focused on the next step. Divorce. I wasn't dragging this out. Lisa made her choice and I was making mine. I called a lawyer. 2 days later, I had the paperwork ready. But Lisa, she wasn't ready to let go. She showed up at my hotel, pounding on the door like her life depended on it. I opened it, barely looking at her. What do you want, Lisa? She looked awful. Puffy eyes, messy hair. Like she hadn't slept in days. Can we talk? Please. I sighed. Talk about what? The man you threw our marriage away for. She flinched. I don't want David. I was stupid, Mark. I was so stupid. I let something meaningless ruin us. But I swear, I never stopped loving you. Asterisk. I scoffed. You have a real funny way of showing love, Lisa. Tears welled up in her eyes. I'll do anything, Mark. I'll cut him off. I'll go to therapy. Just, please don't do this. I leaned against the doorframe. So, let me get this straight. When you were sneaking around with David, you didn't care about our marriage. But now that you're about to face real consequences, suddenly you love me again. I never stopped. Stop lying. I snapped. Just stop, Lisa. You got caught. That's why you're here. Not because you regret it, but because you regret getting caught. She broke down sobbing. Mark, please. We have 30 years together. You're my best friend. That hit me, because once upon a time it had been true. Lisa was my best friend. The person I trusted more than anyone. And then I thought about all the lies. The nights she came home smelling like wine. The excuses. The way she humiliated me with my own brother. I shook my head. I don't even know who you are anymore, Lisa. I'm still me, she cried. I lost my way. I held up the divorce papers. Then you can find your way without me. She stared at them, horrified. Mark, no. Please. I placed them in her hands. Sign them. Or don't. It's happening either way. She clutched the papers, her whole body trembling. You really won't forgive me? No, Lisa, I said calmly. I won't. And for the first time I saw it, realization. She knew it was over. Lisa didn't sign the papers right away. Instead, she dragged things out, calling me constantly, sending long, emotional texts, even showing up at places she knew I'd be. But I didn't budge. I had given her 30 years of my life. I wasn't giving her another minute of my peace. Eventually, reality must have sunk in because 3 weeks later, I got a call from my lawyer. She signed. That should have been the end of it. But, of course, Lisa couldn't let me go without one last attempt at manipulation. That night, she showed up at the hotel again. I almost didn't open the door. But part of me was curious. What excuse did she have this time? She looked different. Not desperate, not apologetic. Just nervous. What now, Lisa? I sighed. She hesitated. I need to tell you something. About David. I crossed my arms. Unless it's that he's moving to Antarctica, I don't care. Mark, it's serious. I let out a bitter laugh. Serious? Like betraying your husband with his own brother. It's about why he did it, she blurted out. It wasn't just some fling, Mark. It was planned. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Lisa wrung her hands. David, he wanted to hurt you. He told me that. He said he'd always felt like you had the perfect life and he didn't. That he was always the screw-up while you were the responsible one. The one mom and dad were proud of. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. So what? I said slowly. This was revenge? Lisa nodded, tears in her eyes. At first, I thought it was just fun. I thought it was harmless. I scoffed. Yeah, because cheating is so harmless, Lisa. But then he started saying things, she continued, about how he'd finally one-upped you. How he was finally the one winning. My blood turned to ice. David hadn't just cheated with my wife. He had targeted my marriage. Deliberately. Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. I think he wanted to destroy you, Mark. And I let him. I took a deep breath, staring at the woman I had once loved. Yeah, I said quietly. You did. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Goodbye, Lisa. I shut the door in her face. And this time it stayed shut. Lisa's confession rattled me more than I wanted to admit. David hadn't just been reckless. He had orchestrated this. He wanted to see me broken. Well, I had news for him. I wasn't broken. I was pissed. And I wasn't done with him yet. A few days later, I got a call from my dad. Your mother and I had a talk with David, he said, his voice tight. He admitted it, Mark. Everything. The affair. The jealousy. The fact that he took a deep breath. That he did this to hurt you. I sat down, gripping the phone. And he's out, Dad said. We told him he's not welcome in this family anymore. I exhaled. David had spent his whole life wanting to be the favorite, wanting to win. And in doing so, he lost everything. He's on his own now, Dad continued. He burned every bridge. Even Mom can't defend him after this. I didn't feel happy, just relieved. Thanks, Dad, I said quietly. I'm sorry this happened to you, son, he said. You deserved better. Yeah, I did, but I wasn't done yet. David had cost me my marriage. It was time for him to lose something, too. With a little digging, I found out he had been trying to land a major contract for his business. It was the only thing keeping his company afloat. And it just so happened that I knew the person in charge of approving it. So I made a call. I didn't lie, I didn't have to. I just told them the truth. About how David conducted himself. About his lack of integrity. A week later, the contract fell through. And just like that, David's business, his last source of stability, collapsed. I didn't feel guilty. He had tried to ruin my life. All I did was expose the truth. I heard through the family grapevine that David had to sell his house. That he was struggling. That he was alone. Just like he deserved. As for Lisa, she moved into a small apartment after the divorce was finalized. I didn't ask how she was doing. I didn't care. She tried reaching out a few more times, but I blocked her. She made her choices. Now she had to live with them. For the first time in months, I felt free. No more lies. No more betrayal. Just a new beginning. And I was ready for it. It's been 6 months since my marriage imploded. 6 months since I walked away from Lisa. Since I cut David out of my life. Since I chose me over a lifetime of betrayal. And you know what? I'm doing better than I ever thought possible. At first, I thought healing would take years. That I'd be drowning in bitterness and resentment. And yeah, the first few weeks were rough. I had moments where I'd wake up and forget, just for a second, that my entire world had shifted. But then, something changed. I realized I wasn't mourning Lisa. I was mourning the idea of her, the version of her that I thought existed. The truth? She had been gone long before I caught her. Once I accepted that, moving on became easier. I focused on myself. I started hitting the gym not out of anger, but because I wanted to feel good again. I reconnected with old friends, the ones Lisa always made excuses to avoid. Turns out, a lot of them never liked her but kept quiet for my sake. I even picked up new hobbies. For the first time in decades, I wasn't walking on eggshells trying to keep someone else happy. I was just living, and it felt damn good. Lisa tried reaching out a few more times. One last voicemail a month ago. She sounded different, defeated, maybe. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I hope you're happy, Mark. You deserve to be. I deleted it without responding. Because her apology didn't matter anymore. As for David, I don't know where he is. I don't care where he is. The last I heard, he was still struggling. Burned too many bridges, lost too much credibility. He went from being the golden boy to having nothing. And honestly, that's not my problem. So where am I now? I'm happy. Really happy. I'm dating again. Not anything serious, just getting out there. Meeting new people. Turns out, Life after 50 isn't as bleak as I thought. Most importantly, I'm at peace. I lost my wife. I lost my brother. But I found myself. And that's a trade I'll take any day. Final thoughts. Advice for anyone going through this. If you're reading this and you're in the same position I was, if you've been betrayed, if you feel like your world is ending, here's what I can tell you. You will survive this. It feels impossible now, but I promise, there's life after betrayal. Don't beg for an explanation. People who betray you will never give you a satisfying answer. Stop looking for closure, they chose this. Cut them off. They don't deserve access to you. Block them. Move on. Focus on you. Get stronger. Rebuild. Use this as a chance to create a life you actually love. One day, you'll look back and realize that losing them was the best thing that ever happened to you. I know I do. Thanks for reading, and to anyone going through this, stay strong. You've got this. This crazy journey is finally over, and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.